guys, I've been experimenting with scripts, which I think make me sound really wooden, so I'm gonna go back to unscripted videos. So today I thought I'd talk about some of the poetry books that I've really enjoyed this year. So the poetry book that I started off this year with was Diving into the Wreck by Adrienne Rich, which I actually read last year and was one of my favourite books. It's a poetry collection written in the 70s, specifically 1971 and 1972. Adrienne Rich was a prominent figure in the feminist and women's rights movement at the time and thereafter. So while she does touch on themes of race, I would say that her poetry is mostly concerned with gender and sexuality and class as well. So I actually studied Adrienne Rich when I was in school, and while I did love Diving into the Wreck, the title poem in this collection, which is a really interesting exploration of gender, I didn't actually love a lot of her other poems, and a lot of that was because I don't think I understood the context of the 1970s women's rights movement. I was kind of looking at it from like a modern lens. A lot of her poetry that we studied I considered to be more quote-unquote obvious. But I think that's what I really like about Rich's collection, is she's very upfront with her feminism, with her discussion of gender and patriarchy. So I loved a lot of the poems in this collection, but I thought I'd just read you the opening passage from The Phenomenology of Anger, which I really enjoyed. The freedom of the wholly mad, to smear and play with her madness, write with her fingers dipped in the length of a room, which is not, of course, the freedom you have. Walking on Broadway to stop and turn back or go on 10 blocks, 20 blocks, but feels enviable maybe to the compromised, curled in the placenta of the real, which was to feed and which is strangling her. This collection is angry and it's powerful and I really recommend it. So then two collections that I really enjoyed are Sunshine by Melissa Lee-Houghton and Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth by Warsan, Shire, both of which I talked about in my Diversathon video. But I thought I'd include them here because I absolutely loved both of them. If you want to know more about what I thought, I would recommend looking at the video. But to give you themes, Sunshine deals with gender and the treatment of women and mental illness, as well as motherhood. And then Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth deals with war and family and trauma. So then another collection that I read was Sharon Olds' Odes. I'd really recommend this collection, but one thing that I would say is maybe don't read all the poems at once, because I did that. I kind of binge read the book and I don't think it held as much power because of it. And I think that's because of the format that the poems in this book take. So every single one of them is an ode. So for instance, it starts with Ode to the Hymen, and then Ode to the Clitoris, Ode to the Penis, Ode of Broken Loyalty. And they all kind of explore themes of gender mostly. A lot of the poems that I really enjoyed in this collection were concerned with her relationship with her mother, who is deceased and who abused her when she was younger. One of my favourites was Donor Party Mother Ode, which starts, I'm glad that my mother was cremated whole, despite the operatic crackling and Medean explosions in the box, and the singing of the fat as it gave up its dazzling ghost. Glad she was consumed to ash and cooled and dried, though some animal grease remained. I felt it. I felt all to touch it. Olds is definitely a very accomplished poet, and I think that comes through this collection, but it's kind of loose and playful as well as dealing with a lot of heavy themes, so I'd really recommend it. So another feminist collection that I read this year was Why God is a Woman by Nin Andrews, which you might have heard about because Jen Campbell recommended it in one of her videos, and then a lot of people started reading it based on that. And this is absolutely wonderful. I really adored it, and I think this is a collection that you can read all in one, unlike Odes, which I think is better in pieces. So in case you don't know what this collection is about, it's basically a reimagined version of society in which patriarchy is switched. So women are on top and men are kind of subjugated to their will. One of the things I find really interesting in this collection is that in some ways sort of patriarchy is directly switched, so that attributes that we generally associate with men are associated with women, so like power, for instance, but then there are some others which we associate with men, which are often seen as a strength in this kind of patriarchal society, but in this society are actually seen as weaknesses. So for instance, men's anger in this collection is seen as a weakness because it's shown that they lack patience And I think this idea of like women's patience is also dealt with really interestingly. So an analogy in this collection to talk about men's impatience and women's patience is that while a man plants a seed in a night, a woman bears it for 9 months. And I think that that's just one of the examples of how this is a real interrogation of sort of gender stereotypes and what they mean. It's also quite a brutal society. Like, it's not a collection where you leave it wishing that you existed there. This collection is also really, really beautifully written, so I'd really recommend it. There are two collections which, while I enjoyed, I didn't quite fall in love with, which were Barefoot Souls by Maram al-Masri, which is translated by Theo Dorgan, and Nine Muses on a Night Out by Hayley Fox Roberts. So I basically picked up Nine Muses on a Night Out by Hayley Fox Roberts because it was in the queer section of the only bookstore in my city that actually has a queer section. So I tend to kind of buy most things if they're there. And I think I was kind of hoping that this would discuss sexuality and queerness, but it doesn't really. It's more focused on family. I guess with this I just didn't quite connect to it, even though it's set in Ireland and a lot of them are specifically set in Dublin where I live. It still felt kind of at a distance for me. It might be kind of difficult to get your hands on a copy of this, but I'll read out the first poem, which is quite short, just so you can get an idea in case you want to go pick it up. Antebella. Antebella kept her belongings in boxes in case she moved, she said. She also taped the letterbox up to keep out unwanted messages. I've got my memories in little boxes labelled Cornwall, London, love, and madness. I keep my letterbox open for extra information. So then the other collection is Barefoot Souls by Maram al-Masri, which is, as I said, translated by Theo Dorgan. And I think this collection was originally written by al-Masri in French, and then she translated it into Arabic, so both are found here on this side of the page. And then Dorgan has translated it into English, so it's on this side of the page. I think my hopes were quite high for this collection because I read the opening poem, which is untitled, and I kind of expected it to be more like that. But the way the poems are formatted, each is from a different person's point of view, mostly women, if not entirely women, and it'll tell you, say, Francois, mother, father, age, occupation, or it might say Clement and Roman, children of Florence, age 12 and 9. There were a few longer poems in the collection which I really enjoyed, and I think a lot of the themes in it possibly weren't explored to the degree that I would have liked. They felt a little bit like they were just kind of hammering in a message a little bit. So I'm not entirely sure if it's the translation or the poems in this collection that I didn't get on with, but I thought I'd read you the poem that I really enjoyed, which is what opens the collection. It's untitled. I have seen them. Those women with faces camouflaged in blue. Those women with bruises hidden between their thighs, their dreams captured, their words silenced. Those women with their weary smiles. I have seen them all pass by in the street, barefoot souls looking over their shoulders, worried about being followed, fearing the footsteps of some storm. Thieves of the moon. They pass in the guise of ordinary women. Nobody can recognize them, except for those who are of their kind. So obviously that poem really blew me away, but it wasn't really a feeling that I got throughout the rest of the collection. So I would maybe research this and see if you might be interested, but I don't know if I can wholeheartedly recommend it. So let me know what you guys think of the scripted versus unscripted videos. And if you've been reading any poetry collections of late, please let me know because I'm always looking for recommendations. So I'll talk to you all later.